Hey everybody, this is Jeff, and this is the Indie Game Legend 3D development log, week number 1, also week number 1 of 2018. So to set up some context, the previous week we'll call week 0, the last week of 2017, was actually the week that I showed my 14-room demo to Paul to sort of pitch the project. And immediately after that call, we found ourselves working on this new project. And so even before week 1 this week, I had mapped out the rest of the rooms for the first area of Indie Game Legend. On Monday, I started working on the rooms that had custom music, so that included the boss room, the rescue room, and the shopkeeper's room. The other thing I did Monday was build a 3D model for the terminal, which was previously a 2D billboard sprite. Paul and I agreed that we should make it 3D, and that day he sent me over a mock of what the model would look like, and so that inspired me to, for the rest of the day, put together a 3D model. This was my first, kind of the first interesting low poly model for the game, and maybe one of the first interesting low poly models I've made, and it was actually done in Unity using Saber, which is the tool I use for most level editing now. What made this really fun on Monday was that a lot of people joined in the chat that day. My new friend Poe, an old friend Eric from when I used True Vision, which is more than a decade ago, back when I used Visual Basic, and also Jazz Mickle. So that was a fun day. There was a lot of people in chat. Tuesday I wanted to tackle the boss room and boss. So when you enter the boss room, it locks the doors, it sounds the alarm, and it spawns the boss and plays boss music. Then when you beat the boss, it unlocks the doors, it spawns a special, plays victory music, and then you go into the rescue room. The rescue room has special music, has a jail that you unlock, and then you talk to the captive. When you talk to the captive, it opens seals, some special doors around the map, and so I decided to take that opportunity to go and actually implement that, which was just having the seals count down and then explode open. I finished the day coming back to the actual boss character's behavior, and in the original it's actually pretty simple. He just follows you around and then every now and then stops and dashes at you. So this was actually pretty easy to implement. Following you around was already the character, the nub enemy's behavior, which was already done, so I just had to have him stop and dash occasionally. Wednesday I finally started tackling the HUD, which would involve text, which I had been putting off since I wanted to get the font that Paul used in the original. He finally found the font, and I used TextMesh Pro to render the font sharply in Unity, because Unity doesn't render true type fonts very sharp. Eventually I got TextMesh Pro to work and actually show it sharply, and so I started sketching out the HUD. But after seeing it, we decided that it could be improved, so Paul sent a rough mock of what he thought it should look like. And I started iterating towards that. Towards the end, I tried to get clever with masks for some of the meter bars like life and ammo. I just couldn't get it to do what I wanted. So later that night, I got it done with static sprites, as I probably should have done from the beginning. Thursday, I continued on the HUD, deciding to re-implement the font using a bitmap font. So Paul sent over a sprite sheet that I was trying to use and figure out how to get to become a bitmap font in Unity, which I'd never done before. And it took quite a while, and I was pretty frustrated with it, and I didn't know exactly how the sprite sheet would need to be, but I eventually finished it and went right on to starting to mock out the minimap. And like everything else in the HUD, this was all just a static mock that I would hook up next, though I did get the player arrow hooked up, so when you turn in the game, it turns on the minimap. And Friday was focused on getting the minimap to work, and this would be the hardest of the HUD to wire up because the data didn't exist. Right, we had all these rooms that were mapped out, but there was no data to know which rooms had which corridors in which direction and to determine their shape and which rooms were next to each other, right? It was physically there, but we just didn't have a data structure. So this took a while to implement, and then started wiring it up so that when you enter a room, the minimap updates, looking up that data and drawing the right icons in the minimap area. So this turned out to be a mess of very redundant code, but it does work. Next week, I'll be finishing wiring up the HUD, and that gets into actually implementing enemy hit points, player damage, and ammo. And I'll also be implementing some of the feedback after this first week, Paul playing with the build, and so we'll see what that is. And that'll pretty much get us to the very first area of the game being completely playable end to end. So I'm excited about that. Join me next week. I'm streaming pretty much every day of the week. See you then.